Hey everyone, I'm Kevin Perry, and I will be taking you through a brief lesson behind Elizabethan and Jacobean theater. So, first and foremost, let's talk about the development of Elizabethan theater. We're going to talk about the Protestant Reformation, the medieval stagecraft, and Renaissance learning and ideas. When we talk about the Protestant Reformation, we're talking about in 1531 how Parliament recognized Henry VIII as head of the English Church, and then how Queen Mary ruled from 1553 until 1558, and then within the Catholic Church, then Elizabeth ruled, and then mystery and morality plays were outlawed as they taught um, Roman Catholic. They taught the Roman Catholic doctrine. In 1588, there was definitely the defeat of the Spanish Armada. The disgrace to Spain greatly damaged its prestige, and then it went back into England's star. Star was on the rise. Elizabeth took the defeat between the Armada as a sign of divine blessing, which influenced, then we start talking about the influence of medieval theater. And then we're talking about the mystery and morality plays, mixing of high seriousness and then the low comedy, and then coming into folk plays, um, dealing with Feast of Fools, and then coming in with interludes, talking about humanistic debates, seeing what people may or may not have to say just about the humanistic way during that time period. Coming in through the Renaissance, the rebirth period. Obviously, Renaissance is the rebirth of classical knowledge and ideas. Um, they used the Roman theater as a model, and then they had a lot of people who came in from different universities, such as Oxford, Cambridge, and of course, Inns of Court. We need to know that the influence of Roman theater, with the five act structure, comedy, such as Plautus and Terence, and then dealing with the plots and the character structure. And then we start talking about tragedy, tragedy with Seneca, dealing with the revenge motif, the irony, the use of ghosts, and then incorporating the violent spectacle. And then, of course, we start talking about how the Elizabethan period having the Elizabethan stock characters such as Cynics, Miles Glorious, the Shrew, the Clever Servant, the Machiavelli, um, the the pedant, the fools, and the clowns, which brings you into the chronicle or the historical or history plays. Um, we start talking about some of William Shakespeare's plays, dealing with historical exemplars such as King Lear, Macbeth, and Julius Caesar, which often turned into tragedies because everyone wants to know, well, what is a good king? And Shakespeare played this out very well with the use of language. Obviously, Shakespeare is known for his plays, but we also need to take into consideration the language that he used is what made his plays absolutely unique. When we start talking about the university wits, we go back to 1556 and 58 and 67 and 1560 when we had George Peele and Thomas Lodge and Thomas Nash and Robert Greene. And then in 1554 with John Lely, or Lely, as some people may say. Um, you know, Robert Greene was best known as he was the first Shakespearean critic. And then John Lilly wrote courtly plays for companies of child actors, and then the plots framed around elegant debates, and then had the youth um, a very unique language. And then we're hitting on some famous people at this time. We're going to talk about Christopher Marlowe, how he had a Master of Arts degree from Cambridge. He's the one who established a blank verse as dramatic medium. Um, he was an overreacher. He was killed in a brawl, and some of his tragedies was Tamburlaine, Ditto, Queen of Carthage, Dr. Faustus, Edward II, Massacre at Paris, and Jew of Malta. Ben Jonson, 1572 to 1637. He was educated at Westminster School, no university, but the most learned of playwrights. He was important of comedies, which every man in his humor, Volpone, the the Alchemist, and Bartholomew Fair were some of his famous works, and he was celebrated. He was a celebrated poet and conversationalist known as Sons of Ben. When we start talking about Jacobean dramatists and tragedy, know that Jacobean tragedy it had a sense of defeat. Spiritual despair, the theme of insanity. All of these things we need to take into consideration whenever we talk about the Jacobean tragedy. Some of the famous Jacobean dramatists: John Webster, Thomas Middleton, Francis Beaumont, John Fletcher, Cyril Tourneur, and John Ford. Some of the famous Jacobean dramatists. Um, when we look deep into the acting companies that were around at this time, normally there were 20 companies of actors in London. Um, Although only 4 or 5 could play in town at one time. Then that brings into the consideration when we dealt with these companies that boys could not be on stage. I mean, the women could not be on stage, and the boys, young men who haven't reached puberty yet, were able to become these women on stage. So the whole acting company was created with child performers, the children of the Chapel Royal and St. Paul's Boys were here, and that was the Puritans. The Puritans who disapproved of theater in general. They were scandalized by boys cross dressing as women. So that brought into the whole, the Protestants taking, the Puritans taking over and telling them that that was no good to have this happen. And then, of course, we go into the mighty William Shakespeare. Of course, April 23rd, 1564 through April 23rd, 1616 was when everything was said to have been done. He was born in Stratford upon Avon. He married Anne Hathaway in 1582 at the age of 18. Supposedly 3 children: Susanna, and Hamnet and Judith. The 1585 through 1592 were known as the lost years, excuse me, and then 1595 record of membership into the Lord Chamberlain's Men. And then, of course, we have all of these different things that we can take into consideration with the Elizabethan theater. But it's good to know. It's good to know that great things came before us. And I didn't really think that I would be able to give you this much information within 10 minutes. But I hope you enjoyed, and I have a PowerPoint that's with this video. Thanks. Bye bye.